Hi everyone, welcome to yet another episode of Kitabi Qisse. Now, this is a program that we launched last year in which we spotlight South Asian creatives and writers and all wonderful people who are doing great work toward language, culture, writing, which inspires our children and communities. And today we have with us Vaishali Patel, who is a teacher, who is a language expert, who's also a creator on Instagram. Before I explain more, I'm going to invite Vaishali. Tell us who you are. Give us a little snapshot for our audience.
Hi, Basha. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be talking to you. Um, my journey, I was born and raised in India, and I came here when I was 16. A tough transition when you're a teenager and you move to a new country, don't speak the language at all because I grew up in Vadodara, which is part of Gujarat, and I only went to a Gujarati medium school, so I knew nothing of English. And when I moved here, I wanted to fit in so badly because I was in a different world, and I wanted to have nothing to do with being Indian because that meant I stood apart and I did not want to stand apart. I wanted to be one of the few. So, it went on for a while, high school, college, then I had my kids, and then I realized, oh no, I want to be Indian because I want them to honor their roots and where they come from. And so, my work with Sanskar Teaching began when my kids were learning Gujarati, and I used to volunteer at our temple, which is, I live in San Diego, the temple's in LA, so about 2 hours each way drive, and that was getting chaotic. So, bottom line is, it all was born out of necessity, as all good things are, So, and I love getting to do the work I do and meeting people that I meet, like you.
It's very interesting somehow as you were talking, Vaishali, and I mean it in the nicest way. It reminded me of Padma Lakshmi's
Oh,
book.
that's so
I don't
sweet.
know if
Yeah,
you've read
that's
her
really
book.
sweet.
She talks about this transition that you're sharing. When you're a teenager, you move into a new country. And I remember reading in her book that she wanted to sort of even change her name because it
Yeah.
made her feel so Indian. And she's like, what kind of a name is this? And I want to be like something as simple as Sharon or something really
Yes.
regular
I
here.
know what you mean.
Right. And so, and that's a really tough transition. So I applaud you for like getting out of it and having this, journey. And the other thing that you spoke, which sort of speaks to me as a person very closely, is this parenting moment when you suddenly
Mhm.
realize that there's more and you need to
Yeah,
explore parts that you might have like just decided to ignore or you might have decided to sort of not pay attention to. And a lot of parents are in that mind space, especially when they're away
sure.
from they might have known as culture, heritage. So, what are some tips for parents, Vaishali? Because you're a parent yourself, you've gone through this journey, which is amazing. What should parents do if they want their children to feel that they belong in these two worlds?
Yeah, no, I think that's a wonderful, wonderful question. And I think not just for parents, but even as adults, for us, this is what we're seeking, right? The sense of belonging. Do I belong here? And for me, I feel like, when I was younger or when I moved here to the States, my parents were busy making a living. So anytime, we had any questions or we wanted to do anything to do with culture, they just said, oh, because our family's been doing it this for years, so we do it. What's shifted for me with my kids and with Sanskar Teaching is that when you explain to the kids why you do certain things, it sinks in a lot more than just saying, oh, we leave our shoes outside the door because that's what we do. That's what Indian people do. But explaining to them that, why do we leave shoes outside our doors? Or things like during Diwali when we do my family is very traditional, so we go all out. There's the 5 days of celebration, and it's now that my kids are older, they appreciate the fact that when they were growing up, I explained it to them. The thing that I wish my mom had done differently when I was looking for that sense of belonging was explain to me that, me being who I am or me being Indian is what makes me me. And it's okay if for a moment if I stand apart or, if I don't look like everybody else, there's nothing wrong with that. And it's funny because for when my mom used to come drop me off at school, I would tell her, don't wear Punjabi or sari or any of that because the looks people gave. And then when my kids started school, my kids went to this education system. It's called the Waldorf schools, where you're probably familiar with it. And they use their head, hearts, and their hands. And it's a very diverse community. Everybody's welcome. So, I wasn't afraid to go drop them off in a sari. The kids weren't, questioning it. They're like, "Oh, hey, mom," like it was just a normal thing. It was no big deal, but it's because as the world grew, when our parents were younger, everybody was not that as accepting as people are these days, and people want to know. And I think we owe it to people to explain things instead of just blowing them off. When somebody's staring at you and they say, "Oh, you look beautiful. What is this called?" Take that time and actually explain to them what is it. But owning who you are starts with you first as a parent before you pass that down to your kids. So you know it's one of those things where we're not in India, we're here, so we're not theirs but we're not here either, we're like in somewhere in between. So it's that finding the sense of belonging starts with, for me at least, what it was owning to all of my regular day-to-day living. So if it's traditions, in our family we do divas in the morning or light diya, we do prayers. So simple things like that. Or, when guests come over, we treat them like, oh, somebody actually took the time to come and visit us, embrace them with love. Little things like that started clicking in my head, which I kind of had shoved it down because I didn't want to have anything to do being Indian. I always looked down upon it. Actually, when my mom would say, in Gujarati, we say, Mehman are coming, and I'll be like, oh, no, why? Now I feel like, oh, somebody is coming over. Oh, that's going to be so much fun. And I don't stress so much about the food and this and that, or they're impressing somebody more than just like connecting with them. And the more I do it, I think it's easier for my kids to see that, the sense of belonging comes from you creating that space for yourself. You walk into a room full of people that don't look like you, but you hold your head high and go, I belong here because I'm here. Right.
Yeah.
So it's a simple fact. So
Yeah.
it's a journey. I mean, it's work in progress. None of us has this figured out, but I think the South Asian diaspora is changing so much where young parents are embracing their language. There are lots of books, lots of things, like lots of excitement we build in our homes around festivals that gives kids, this ability to feel like, oh yeah, I am Indian. This is what we do. Or parents are taking time to go to schools and talk to the schools and their friends about what do our festivals mean? What makes us who we are? But, this is just what's been working for me. I think language definitely is one of the biggest things. And for me personally, I'll tell you what's been amazing. I had this last year, I went to India for 2 months, and that's the longest I've ever been back since I came here. So it was a long trip. But in that process, what I learned is, as much as everybody in India is embracing English so much, there are very few families that are still speaking their native languages, especially in the cities. In small villages, they do it. But I brought back a lot of books that are in Gujarati because that's what I read. And just reading in Gujarati, your thinking starts becoming like, there are certain things that I think in Gujarati, like it's so books have a big part. I mean, for at least for me, it's played a big part in making me feel like, this is, if I want to really embrace who I am, like some things you understand, if you speak Hindi, if you read something in Hindi, you lose so much in translation. You connect with it so much better if you're just, thinking in Hindi. But that's what works for me. And I think parents are actually doing a wonderful job, these days. And speaking at home is hard. Speaking in your native language at home is hard, but we all got to do what we can, you know?
I truly appreciate it. There were a couple of things. My head was buzzing as you were talking. So I think it's definitely relatable. One, I was at a Waldorf school last fall and I did a Diwali workshop there and I was
That's what
shocked at
Yeah.
how quickly kids were like, oh, I'm going to be Ram and I'm going to be Ravan. And
Mhm.
they had zero idea, right? Like I came in
Yes.
completely new
Yeah.
and they were all very accepting of it. And I was very impressed by how welcoming that culture was. My son is still, he's 4, so he's still kind of like getting into the system, but it was very impressive. And, talking about my own child, he asked me something today, just like an hour or two ago. He said, why do you like being yourself? And for a 4-year-old to ask such a profound question, I don't think he understood it, but he asked me this. And I was thinking about it, but now that I've spoken to you, I feel like I am going to absorb that differently on how I communicate this idea out, because kids start noticing differences really early on, and I think it's our job as parents to sort of lead them toward like positive associations, so that they feel that that's okay if they're different, or that's okay if they celebrate different things. And it is overwhelming, to be honest, as a parent, but just to even decompress and hear you, I was like, okay, we are at least going in the right direction. You know what I mean? So yeah, so I hope like parents who hear this, especially, they should know that not every day is going to go per plan, but as long as you're moving forward, and that matters. And Vaishali, you teach the language, and I've seen so many of your videos where you break the language down. And what I really like about those videos is that they contextualize it for where we are right now. So it feels
Mhm.
less tough. Like it's not something that is back home in India, which is harder to understand. As an
Right.
example, like I had a parent I spoke to who was like, in a Hindi book,
Mhm.
their children read Ga se Ganna. Now, you don't always get Ganna in the United States,
Yeah.
but children were finding it hard. And I've
Right.
seen your videos, and they are very much like based in place here, or at least I feel that way. Like I instantly can relate to it. So, have you heard feedback from parents, especially here as you teach? Like, share with us, like, what do parents say?
That was one of my goals when I created the whole curriculum, was that to, a lot of people, when they see my videos in India, they'll say, well, if you're teaching Gujarati, why are you talking in English? Because the thing is that, we live in a world where we have to embrace both of it. Like I can't just be one or the other. And that, like when we were talking about festivals, right? As much as I embrace Christmas, I can embrace Diwali. I could do both. There's no reason why I have to choose one over the other, or, be excited about one more than the other. So when it comes to language, tools and stuff, it a lot of people get caught up because I know this particularly for Gujarati, is that different parts of Gujarat speaks Gujarati very differently. And I know Hindi is like that too, where, it's spoken differently. And a lot of times adults in general, we get carried over about, like, this is a proper way of speaking, or this is, non-proper way. Mine is really broken. Mujhe nahi aata hai. Like there's all this stuff that goes on. So that's why I created my alter ego, Kamla Masi, that I do, is that it's okay. Speak however because I think it's also good as a parent for your kids to see that you're not gods. You're imperfect. And it's okay. You can be goofy. You can be funny about language learning. It doesn't need to be by the book, because, this is one thing that I didn't want when I started teaching, was the way a lot of things, as good intention they are, but in India it's taught like, sit down and give me I mean, I don't know if you went to a school like that, but I did when I was younger, where I had to put my hand out and there was a ruler and I got, slapped in my hand, kind of thing. And I think that, just sucks the joy out of learning. And this is why when I mentioned Waldorf, is that a lot of our language curriculums, all of them are based off of the Waldorf system. Is, if there's a spring class, we're actually gardening outside and learning those things in the language you're learning. If you're learning Malayalam, then you're learning about, so then it's like interwoven into the life that you're leading now, rather than, like this dream world. So one of our homework is like, if you're doing learning animals, you're going to the zoo and actually seeing the animals. You're taking our vegetables. We do the scavenger hunt, where parents take this paper, go to a farmer's market, and the kids are naming the vegetables in Hindi or Gujarati as they're learning, so that it's not, it makes you feel like I'm not the oddball because I'm learning, I have to go to Gujarati class or Sunday school. It's more like, this is who I am. And down the road, as I get older, I realized that even as young parents, it's so important for them. Like if you grew up in a Hindi speaking home, but your parents forced it on you, so you spoke it, then you went off to college and you were like me and you're like, I don't want to have anything to do with this. And now you have kids and you're like, wait, I do want to have my Hindi or my Gujarati or whatever it is. It's not too late to pick it up again, you know, because when you are learning, for me particularly, because I'm on a specific spiritual path where I want to learn all these, scriptures and literature and things that I want to learn. And I told you earlier that the gist of it gets lost when I'm trying to read the translation or the English part of it. So, for me, it's like make your language learning relevant, or not just the language part of it, but your day-to-day life, so that it's relevant to where you are. If you live in London and I'm teaching you about Hawaii, it's kind of hard. You're just dreaming. You're never going to be able to relate to it. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just a silly
Yeah,
example, but you
yeah,
see
no,
what I'm trying to say.
no, exactly. And I think, it's very relevant to say food, for example. Like I grew up in and around Delhi, so very Hindi, but at the same time, my mother tongue is Kashmiri. So it's kind of funny that I can speak Hindi really well, but if you ask me about food names, my head is stuck in Kashmiri because it's very hard for me to, because my mom cook.
But
And
yeah,
so I'm kind of
yeah,
used to like having food. That's my
yeah,
food language. And
yeah.
so, sometimes even in my head, I'm translating, and people who are multilingual, who speak more than
Mhm.
one or two languages, they are constantly switching. And
Yes,
I think, we have to give ourselves grace that it's okay for us to not have that perfection in every language. And I think I also see parents who are at this, like, big spectrum. One is the parent saying at least a few words are okay, and the other parent is like it should be perfectly
yeah,
shared, which, that's
yes,
okay. Like, I guess we have tools for different aspects of what parents are trying to do. But I guess at least my goal as a parent is that I am teaching the child in a way that he feels it's interesting and exciting, and
exactly.
doesn't like raise his hands and say this is like not something I want to do at all.
Sure. I just remembered a story from one of the parents that I had. So one of our blocks was Kabirji's Doha. So the students learn because they're two-line couplets. They're easy. They recite them. We explain the meaning to them. And one of the parents, actually dads, normally it's moms that are more involved in the language learning, but it's changing. And one of the dads sent me a message saying, they were watching a football game, and the dad started really getting excited, and he was getting up and was like, come on, go, go, go. And he said, my little boy got up and he started singing Dheere Dheere Re Mana Dheere Sab Kuch Hoy, which is about patience. And he goes, I was shocked because he goes, it was strange in the moment, but I love that these kind of little things that they're learning in your classes are actually sticking to them, and then they can relate to where it needs to be applied in their life. So, I mean, it's a work in progress, but it's very fulfilling to hear stories like that for me, that whatever little efforts that I'm making, they're actually touching lives.
I love that example. We are very much a football loving family, and
Of
because my husband's like that, he gets overexcited, and I think my son
course.
initially was surprised. And I think it was such a great anecdote. I love that. So, you were briefly touching on this, so I'm going to take you back a little bit. Like, what is the hope that you have to do more with what you've started? Where do you see it going? What are some of the things we should be expecting as people who want to learn, or as like just general readers? What should the community be aware of?
So one of my goals and hope is that I live in San Diego, so we have a lot of Hispanic friends, and they freely speak Spanish with their children. And I want Gujarati or Hindi or Indian families to speak fluently with their kids without being, because I've seen parents be hesitant. They feel like either it's you're still too backwards because you're stuck onto your language, whatever the beliefs that go through our heads. We all have our own set of stuff that goes on up there, but I think it would be fun, for not just fun, but it's nice for the kids to know that, in our home, we speak Hindi. So when you're out and about, if mom and dad are talking to you, talk to them in Hindi. It's normal. That doesn't mean your child will never speak English, because that's one of the concerns parents have when the kids are really young at home. And you will see when they transition to like preschool age, it my sister's little one was only spoke Gujarati at home. At 3, when they put him into preschool, yeah, the first couple of weeks he had no idea what they were talking about. If the teacher came and if he wanted a spoon, he'll just say chamchi because he didn't know what a spoon was called. But in that, after that 2 weeks, he started like learning more because, kids are sponges. They can adapt to multiple languages at the same time. They're not going to be so, you know, as adults, we get so concerned and over concerned sometimes about how this is all going to play out. But yeah, my hope is that all of us, if, like, sometimes I'll give you an example. When I'm talking to you, like, my tendency is I want to start talking in Hindi because that's our comfort level. If I meet somebody Gujarati, my assumption right away is that, like, let's talk in Gujarati. But even though they may be from Gujarat, they don't speak Gujarati. And I would love to change that. I think that would be fun for parents, people. You could be the CEO of, multi-million dollar company or whatever, wherever you are in your life. If you are not connected to your roots and you're not embracing them wholeheartedly, it I don't know how it is for everybody else, but in my opinion, I think it's hard to go fly high when you're not anchored. And I think what anchors you is your culture. And your culture, one of the biggest ways is your language. And just spoken language alone is not enough. So one of the things we have in our house, and my kids are now adults, but we subscribe to Gujarati magazines. So I have Chitralekha that comes in. So our bathroom readers have Chitralekha. So they get to practice their Gujarati skills, or having little tools like that around your home so that, it doesn't feel like, oh, this is so hard because the rest of the world is all English and I have to come back and, little things. So again, books play a big role, but exciting things for me that are coming up that, well, a couple of the things I'm not allowed to talk about yet, but what I really like is that, we have little memory games that we've created in Hindi and Gujarati. So we're bringing those back because we had discontinued them. And the thing about the social media world that I'm learning is that it takes a lot out of you because it's all you're putting your energy out constantly. And sometimes it's easy to just, spread out in multiple direction and lose direction. And it had been like that for me for the last couple of years, but I think I've kind of come back to why I do this and what makes this, so satisfying for me. So I'm coming back to that part of it. And, I mean, there are a few things that I'm working on. I'm working on creating a story series on YouTube for kids that speak Gujarati. So I'm excited. That'll be fun. It's called Varta with Vaishali Masi. So that'll be fun. I'm excited to do that. But what makes me happier is that there are so many other brands and so many other people in this, the language tools, South Asian diaspora that are wonderful, and they're creating not just like the festivals but there are baby books out there are more books out there. I don't know how recent this is going to happen, but one of my dreams is to have readers for Gujarati and Hindi. So the simple 3-word letters that people can read, because what happens is that they attend classes, they'll practice at home, but then they've mastered it, but they need something to continuously keep them going, because you could be fluent in Hindi at the age of 7. So you feel like, okay, my learning has ended. Now I could speak properly and I'm reading and writing. But then you don't do anything about it till you're adult and you're like, wait, I forgot all about it. What happened? So something that keeps them going throughout their life, not just a one period of their life or one phase of their life. Yeah, so those are exciting things that I'm looking forward to.
I love that. I love the story series. We actually run a program called Varta, so it's very much
Oh,
resonating in my.
amazing.
So, yeah, that's really cool. And I think story is a great way to share because it doesn't feel like force. It feels engaging. So we
Mhm.
definitely believe in that. And I think to do something which is accessible to kids using that medium is fun. So I definitely will look it up. There are lots of people creating work. Is there anyone's work you would like to highlight that you really enjoy?
I don't mean to sound negative, but what I feel like is that there are some books that are created for just for the sake of creating, because people may think that, I know the basic skills, but they're not accurate. And that breaks my heart because new young parents, they trust everything that's out there because we don't have enough things out there for, language learning or any South Asian books. And there's a couple of brands that I truly, truly trust. One of them is, it's that time of the year. I think she's based out of England, and she's done festival books. And I like her festival books because they're not only does she talk about what it means, how we do it, but she has guidelines on, how they can bring it forward and continue doing it. Or, why is there rice in your Rakhi thali or things like that. And then the other brand is out of Canada, Bright Bandar and Co. I think Dhwani is her name. Her Gujarati, Hindi, I think she has her books in 8 Indian languages. They are phenomenal. My nieces and nephews, we play with their puzzles. She has things like opposites. So you're learning more than just, her first words book is so accurate. And what I like about them is that they're objects around your space. So it's like your room, what are you learning in your room? And, I bottom line for me is language learning has to be fun. It's not something you impose it on kids, and it's never about perfection. I think a lot of parents feel like, you're investing money, time, energy. So you have expectations and you're allowed, but you also need patience because it's not something that happens overnight. It's continuously it has to be built on. But that's just my opinion. I think that's something that's in my last few years of experience. That's what's worked, is those parents that make it a lifestyle rather than just language learning. Like it's not a camp or a course I'm doing and then it's over.
No, that's very accurate. I speak a language where the script became extinct several years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And there were attempts at reviving the script, but that is still very pedantic. So that's not the way the language was growing. The only way the language grows is when it was spoken in families. And
Yeah.
I, for example, I can translate books. That is my level of Kashmiri, so it's not bad, but
Yeah.
it's completely something I've learned from my grandmother or my mother talking to
Yeah.
them. So it's really been like orally shared. And there is something to be said about many of those languages. The world is losing 2 languages every 3 weeks. So a lot of knowledge kind of like
Yeah.
dies in that. And I hope that parents who speak languages that could be like spoken by few people, dialects that are very special, are uh, sort of thinking that you don't just lose the language, you lose like a
Yeah.
whole world when that
Yes.
happens.
Well,
So please
most
start when you
definitely.
can, and it's not easy, but it is something that's worth preserving, is what I would say, at least from my perspective
Most
too.
definitely. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
do agree with you.
And I
And
love
one of the things
also.
I just
Go ahead.
wanted to, sorry to interrupt you,
No,
but
no.
when you mentioned your grandmother, I just thought that it's a fun thing to share is that one of the things that what sets our curriculum apart is that we involve grandparents and their wisdom into our curriculum. So we have a series that's called Dada Ba Homework, where the kids actually have to connect with their grandparents and talk about, whatever their day-to-day life or what their childhood was like, and it's in the language. So there's like a little bit of English, a little bit of that, like it's not just saying, okay, you must memorize this and ask them this question. It's connecting with grandparents because they have a lot of wisdom. The only part I would say is that we were lucky when we were young where our grandparents only spoke that language. Now grandparents speak English. And as soon as they feel like the child is retreating back because they don't understand Hindi, they'll bring in English. So that attempt to connect through the language is kind of, disappearing. So hopefully that changes,
I hope
you know.
so. I mean, I have to force my mom to talk in
I
Kashmiri
know.
with my kid because, like many families, actually, my husband speaks a different language. He's from a different part of India. So that makes it even more complex. We have like two
Yeah.
sets of grandparents speaking different languages, and that's not uncommon anymore. But,
Yes, not at
it
all.
just is more effort. Or at least the grandparents have to be coached into saying, please
Yes.
speak what you will speak, because let's not try to make it easy, because
Yes.
that's our human tendency to say, okay, child is not understanding, let me overprotect. And
Yeah.
that's just parents and grandparents, and it's hard, like it's just hard work having to remember that. So it is, when you're away from India, when you're away from your heritage country, that just is the additional step to be
Yes,
taken.
that's where our little bit of work on our part lies in that part. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Vaishali, this is so fun. I was like, okay, I'm trying to remember all the things you said, and I really felt them as a parent. So I really think the work you're doing is very relatable. It's very much required for me as a parent, and I'm sure for many, many communities that you're connected with. And thanks for doing all of this great work, because we need more
So
people.
no, this is exciting. Thank you. So